everyone, so this is a tutorial for HA118 about researching fashion history. And in this tutorial, we'll be going over some library resources as well as some research tips that will help you with your assignments in this class. So first of all, when you're researching a topic, some things to keep in mind. So for example, if your topic is Coco Chanel in the 1920s, that's actually not a great search term to use. And the reason for this is Chanel as a brand existed for many decades outside the 1920s. So a lot of times there isn't a specific book on a specific decade for a specific brand. So what I recommend doing is actually starting really broad in your search and just searching for Coco Chanel as a designer, or searching for 1920s fashion, or maybe something like Art Deco fashion. And then once you find a book on that topic, go to the index and see if the 1920s is covered in the book about Chanel, or go to the book about the 1920s and see if Coco Chanel is mentioned in the index. The way that you search for books is different from how you would do a Google search. So a lot of times for books in our catalog, the only information that is searchable is the title or a very short description. So that's why when you're doing fashion history research in our book collection, try going broad first and then narrowing your search when you actually get to the shelf and you're looking at the books. Another tip to keep in mind is that searching eras in our catalog is actually a little bit difficult. First of all, the library catalog wasn't set up with fashion history in mind specifically. Another reason is that decades are not actually a thing in fashion history. So an example I always give is, December 31st, 1929, when the clock struck midnight, we didn't suddenly change our outfits and say, it's the 1930s now, new clothes, right? So decades are actually kind of an artificial way of examining fashion history. But that said, I know that it's a convenient starting point for search. So I have some suggestions. And one is to just try different search terms, because you never know which one is actually going to be a better fit for a decade in terms of how people are thinking about it or writing about it. So as an example, for the decade of the 1920s, there's several different search terms you could use if you're starting a search on this topic in the catalog. You could try 1920s written out as numbers, 1920s written out as letters, or alternate terms such as Jazz Age or Gatsby era. And if you were to do these three searches in our catalog, these are how many books you would pull up. So 1920s in numbers actually gets you the longest list of books, and Jazz Age actually gives you the shortest list of books. That said, though, if you were to actually look at the list of results, you might find that Jazz Age is actually a better search because the books are more relevant. And you might notice when you search 1920s in numbers that that long list of 300 books actually has a lot of irrelevant results in it. So these are just things to keep in mind. There's many ways to search a specific era, and sometimes more results is not always better. So do what works for you, and if something is not working, try a different term. All right, so the way to search for books is through our catalog, OneSearch, and this is the direct URL, onesearch.fitnyc.edu. But to be honest, I usually just go to our website and I search FIT NYC Library. And you'll see that usually we're the first result, Gladys Marcus Library, that's us. And then this is the widget for our catalog here. So let's say that I was searching for the designer, Charles James. I would just type in his name. Now, something you'll notice here is that I'm not actually getting very good results right now. And I think that's because both Charles and James are super common names just in the English language. So one thing you might want to do is put quotations around your search. And this is good for any search term that's more than one word. But it's particularly good if you're searching for a designer's name. So before, the computer was searching the word Charles and the word James in any order wherever they appeared in any context. But now I'm telling the computer, just search Charles James in this order with these two words next to each other. So when I repeat the search, you'll see that, oh, now I'm getting much better results. I'm getting a lot of results for Charles James, the designer, and that's why. It's because I used quotes. So once you have a list of results, you can start looking through it, click on it for more information. You'll see that the call number is going to be here. That tells you where the book is on the shelf. If you scroll down, You'll see a description, table of contents information, and if you keep scrolling, you can see a virtual browse at the bottom that lets you browse the bookshelf virtually, which is really convenient. You'll also see that there is a citation button here, and that will generate a citation for you automatically. Just make sure that you have the correct citation format. For this class, I believe it's Chicago. So one thing to know about our catalog is that the default search that you're looking at right now is actually searching all the SUNY and all the CUNY campuses. So if you just want to see what we have on site right now at the FIT library, you can select the library filter on the side and then Gladys Marcus Library. And now it's just going to show you things that we have. If you do want to interlibrary loan a book from another library, and I'm just using an example of a book I know we don't have, right? If it's a book we don't have that you can interlibrary loan, it will say check for available services. You would click on that, and then you'll be asked to sign in. So you're going to sign in with the same username and password as your FIT email. You don't have to set up a separate one. And now you'll see there's a link that appears, request from another library, and then click send request. And that's it. That's all you have to do. The book should arrive at our library and you'll get an email when it's available. So going back to my results for 1 second, I just want to show you some of the other filters that you might find helpful. Publication date is a really good one. So right now we're searching through books from 1801 to 2025, but sometimes you may want books that are the most recent, from the last 10 or 15 years. Or if you're looking at a historical period, maybe you want to limit to, say, the 1950s and see books that were actually published in that era. That can be very helpful. One thing you'll notice when you're logged in is that you'll see your name at the top, and then you can look at your account and you can also track your requests as well as renew your books through the catalog. I just want to mention about call numbers, how to read them. So in the catalog, you'll notice that they're listed horizontally, whereas on the actual spine of the book, they're listed vertically, and that can be a little bit confusing. So just remember to read the letter at the beginning first, so GT, and just realize that GT 580 also represents the subject area. So books with that same call number are going to be on the same shelf and going to be about the same subject. The third line just represents the author's last name. And then the fourth line is the year published, and that will tell you which edition of the book you have or how recently or how long ago the book was published. Some books also have special stickers on them that say art reference or library use only. Just realize that those books can't be checked out. So if you want to take it home, make sure you grab another copy of the book without the sticker, or just be aware that you can scan pages of the book using the book scanners in the stacks, and those are free, and they go to your Gmail account, or you can send them to your Google Drive. Also, a reminder that especially if you are the type of person who really likes to browse the shelves and look around for research, the same topic can be covered in different ways, and so it can be in multiple sections in the library and on different shelves. So for example, these are two books that are about Paul Poiret. The first one is more of a biography, so it's been classified and shelved in the fashion biography section, which is TT 505. The second book is more about Poiret in a specific time period he was designing, and so that's in the fashion by time period section, GT 1720. And just FYI, these two sections, TT 505 and GT 1720, are great places to get started if you just want to browse the shelves for ideas or inspiration for fashion history research. All right, so the way that I do this exercise in class is I take a pause here. So you might want to follow along and just pause this tutorial and see if you can find one or two books on your topic using the OneSearch Library Catalog. So this next section is about databases. And just a reminder that databases are simply a collection, usually comprising articles and journals. But at FIT, we have some specialized ones that include image databases and video databases. So one really helpful source for fashion history research is the Berg Fashion Library. Sometimes we call it Bloomsbury, which is actually the platform it's hosted on. So I just wanted to point that out so you're not confused. Coverage includes the years from 500 BCE to 2010. It does cover global fashion, although I will say that this database is definitely stronger for 18th, 19th, and 20th century fashion. You can narrow by time period. You can also narrow by geographic location and narrow by designer. This database was actually built with fashion history research in mind, unlike our catalog. So a lot of the filters and a lot of the settings are actually really, really helpful for fashion history research. I also recommend looking out for encyclopedias. There's a lot of great fashion history encyclopedias in this resource that give you a helpful overview of a topic. If you want to know more about Berg Fashion Library, you can pause the video here and jump to the playlist and watch the video we have that goes into Berg Fashion Library more in depth, or feel free to check it out at the end of this video. The next database is JSTOR, which you might be familiar with because a lot of people use it for humanities research like English or history. It's also great for fashion history though. There is a really great image collection in here that's drawn from many different museums and cultural institutions around the world. Those include the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Museum FIT, the V&A Museum in London, just to name a few. Now you could search all those museums' websites separately, but with JSTOR, it lets you search all of them in one place, which can be super convenient. I also think there's a lot of small, lesser known museum collections that are included in here that you might not find out about unless you knew about them ahead of time. So it's a great way to discover other museums as well. So JSTOR covers the years 2000 BCE to 2021, and I've personally noticed that they are a little bit better for earlier fashion that predates the 17th century. So medieval fashion, prehistoric fashion, I've found that they have more resources on those earlier eras. It's not set up with fashion history research in mind, but there is a category in the filter on the left where you can narrow to fashion, costume, and jewelry as a classification, which can be super helpful for finding museum garments or fashion photography images. And it does let you filter by date and geography. So again, if you want to watch a tutorial specifically for JSTOR, you can jump to the tutorial link in the playlist. Next, I want to talk about the Fashion and Race database. So this is a really great database that expands coverage. A lot of the other databases tend to cover fashion from a white European centrist point of view. And so the Fashion and Race database really expands coverage to areas that are undercovered or understudied. It specifically looks at the history and impact of race in the fashion system. And personally, I recommend checking out the library that has open access scholarly articles and the Objects That Matter essays. And a lot of these essays, profiles, and object analyses are authored by racialized and minoritized scholars and writers who offer unique perspectives and authority in these areas. So again, if you want more information on the Fashion and Race database, check out our tutorial on that specifically at the end of this presentation. And so next we have the Fashion History Timeline. So this is great because this is not a subscription resource. It's an open access resource that anyone can use, but it was put together by FIT professors and one of our colleagues in the library, as well as FIT students. So this covers fashion history from the ancient world to 2019. It is chronological by century and then by decade, and it includes essays on artwork, garments, film, BIPOC, and LGBTQ+ people. All right, so next we have magazines. Most of our magazines are down on the 4th floor and are available in print, but we do have a few issues that are fully digitized and keyword searchable, which is super convenient. So these three titles, Vogue, Women's Wear Daily, and Harper's Bazaar, I include them together because they're all on the ProQuest platform, so they have pretty similar interfaces, but they all tend to cover late 19th and 20th century fashion. They look mostly at upper and middle class American fashion, but we also have titles that include Vogue Italia and Harper's UK. We also have a collection called the Women's Magazine Archive, and this includes titles such as Ladies' Home Journal, Essence, 17, Cosmopolitan, and Redbook. These focus more on late 19th century, 20th century fashion for middle and working class Americans. And these are also hosted on ProQuest within the same collection. So in this part of the presentation, when I give it live, I ask students to go ahead and find an article from one of the databases we mentioned. So if you're following along at home, you might want to pause this and try one of these databases just so that you have it fresh in your mind as I'm explaining it. All right, so I do want to mention the magazines on the 4th floor a little bit. I just talked about the digitized magazines, but most of our magazine collection lives on the 4th floor. Sometimes we call these periodicals or we call these journals, but they're in the periodicals and forecasting room. And the guide to see all of the magazines is at this URL here, fitnyc.libguides.com/periodicals by subject. But if you are on our library homepage, you'll see there's a link to magazines over here. And this opens up into a guide to all of our magazines that are arranged by subject. So the way this works is you click on the subject that you're interested in. So let's say that you're interested in magazines about menswear. You can see the full list here. Anything in red is something that we're still subscribing to. Anything that's not in red is either not publishing anymore or we're not subscribing to them actively. And so for those, you can see the exact dates of what we have listed underneath. This list is also available by decade. So if you scroll to the very bottom, you'll see a bunch of tabs. So for example, if you want to see which menswear titles we have from the 1970s, you can click on 1970s and see what we have from that decade. So that's the magazine collection. And a little reminder, some titles need to be requested from behind the desk. We have to pull them for you because they're in storage. So this is what the desk looks like. And these are the slips that you have to fill out. They have first and last name. And then you fill out the titles and then the dates that you want and give it to the person at the desk and they will retrieve those items for you. So lastly for this presentation, I'm just going to mention places to get help for citation. I did mention that there are some citation tools within the library catalog, but let's say you're citing something like a website or an image, you might need a little bit more help. So this is our citation guide for Chicago style citation. If you have your phone on you, you can scan this QR code, but you can also just go directly to this link, fitnyc.libguides.com/citing Chicago. And I'll just give you a look at what that looks like. A lot of times I will just search FITNYC citing Chicago, and it should be the first result. So as you can see, this is broken up by type of citation. So you have things like in-text citations, things that are not as commonly explained, how to cite images, how to cite websites. But we also have added a section on how to cite the use of AI tools. So if you're using an AI tool, your professor wants to know, so make sure that you're including that information in your citation. The second to last tab here goes over the works cited page and what that should look like. So we have an example here that's from Outlet Purdue, and it just shows you the proper format for what a bibliography should look like. That was the research guide for Chicago style citation. Keep in mind that we also have a research guide for fashion and clothing history, and we also have one for runway coverage, in addition to the one that I showed you earlier about periodicals or magazines. Thank you for joining me today. I hope that was helpful. Please keep in mind that if you run into any issues, so you're having a problem with research, you can't find a resource you're looking for, or a database is not working or an article is not loading, you can always ask the library. There's a link on our homepage right here. When you click on that, that will go to this page that gives you a lot of different options for how to get in touch with us. So there's a chat button on the top. You can always chat with a live person. You can email us through this form down here, or you can call us, text us, or schedule a one-on-one consultation.